All right, and we are live on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. If you guys are watching live, you will see that it's just me and Dennis today. Matt is taking care of some stuff, and he also decided he really didn't want to talk about the two, teams that nobody really likes in the AFC North. I know me and Dennis are not fans of either one of them, but before we get talking about the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers, how you doing today, Dennis? How was your Monday? How was your weekend?
Man, it's my first day back to work after about 10 days of vacation. It's the tale of two vacations. If you ask my wife, it was probably one of the worst vacations she ever had because we didn't do anything. We stayed around the house. If you ask me, it was a fantastic vacation. I didn't do anything. Just hung out at the house, jumped in the pool when it got too hot, and just kind of relaxed. So I don't know.
There's nothing wrong with that. Those are some of my favorite vacations. Like, I love going and doing stuff with my family and getting to go do all different kinds of things we don't get to do when we're here. But then at the same time, when you just get to kind of sit around and relax and do nothing all week, man, it's glorious. So I'm right there with you. That first day is always the worst day back. I do agree with you on that. So as I mentioned, we are talking about the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously, just to touch on it, today was the first padded practice day for NFL teams. So for those of you who have been watching, there's been a ton of news coming out. Obviously, I haven't seen anything really big that we need to touch on. We got the Gerald McCoy injury for IDP leagues. I believe it's a ruptured something tendon. I can't remember now. Quad tendon. Yeah. So he's likely done for the year. I mean, I know I saw the reports of Nick Chubb leaving early. He's been being evaluated for concussion. Nothing confirmed yet on if he does or doesn't have one. So outside of those, though, I didn't see much else. Just a lot of different players running with the ones, twos. I'm not going to read too much into that for now. Anything that kind of stuck out to you for the news?
Well, I was a little bummed to see Hawkinson said he's not 100%. His ankle's still giving him trouble. So hopefully, he makes it through that okay and gets back to 100% quickly. I know Rodney Anderson was one of our favorites, and to see him get cut by Cincinnati, failed his physical today. So, it is what it is. He tore the ACL in the same knee, 15 months apart or something. It was a rough. He had a rough road ahead of him. So we'll see if he gets picked up.
Yeah, I'd love to see it just because I think he's just a phenomenal player, what he was able to do at Oklahoma when he was healthy. And obviously, I think it's the same knee twice, right, that he tore that ACL in? It was the same knee twice?
Yep.
Yeah, so hopefully he gets picked up by somebody. And we joked off air that, knowing our luck with as much as we like him, he'd end up going to Washington. So,
right.
And that would just be, I feel like, the worst place for him to land. But I do hope that he bounces back.
Our luck, he'll go to Pittsburgh.
Yeah. Well, hey, I wouldn't mind that. I keep trying to fall in love with Pittsburgh players, and I like Juju, but that's about it. I can't seem to end up drafting anybody else on those teams. But we are going to talk about the Steelers second today as they finished behind the Baltimore Ravens. Actually, the Ravens finishing 14-2 were the only team to make the playoffs last year for the AFC North. Surprising because a lot of people were all in on Pittsburgh and Cleveland as well with the team they put together last year. They did lose to Tennessee in the divisional round. I don't want to say necessarily an upset. There were some people that did pick Tennessee. I was one of them to win that game. But Baltimore did definitely look like one of the best teams last year. And so what are you expecting from their offense this year? We always hear that these teams, take a step forward when they're in these schemes and everything for multiple years. This is now the third year Lamar Jackson is going to be in this offense. Only got to play a handful of games, obviously, that first year. Full second year, we saw MVP, phenomenal year. Everybody else, a couple of new pieces coming in. But how much do you expect this Ravens offense to get better or possibly worse in this new 2020 season?
Well, I think it depends on what you mean by better. So, for instance, Lamar Jackson rushed for 1,200 yards last season, led the team in rushing. I think that the possibility exists that he may lead the team in rushing again, but it'll be, in my estimation, somewhere in the 800 to 900 yards. And I think you could conceivably have Jackson, Ingram, and Dobbins all rush for over 900 yards this year. I feel like he's going to drop down from that 176 attempts. If he cuts 30 attempts, 35, maybe even 40, the challenge will be for him is, can he stay with the efficiency he had passing the ball? I mean, they threw the ball the least amount in the NFL last season, but he still had 36 touchdown passes because they were trying to defend the threat of his running. I like the way the team is set up, but Hollywood Brown has to be healthy all season. A second wide receiver has to step up, whether that's Boykin. I hear they're bringing Des Bryant in for a physical. I think you saw that video of Drake running that route, floating around Twitter. To me, that's what Des Bryant's going to look like. I think his knees are shot. He's gotten old. I don't know. Maybe they sign him. Maybe they don't. I know he's still chasing that NFL money. I like the way the team is set up. They have a decent defense. They're still going to run the ball. They're a run-first team. And adding Dobbins to Ingram and Edwards and Jackson is going to keep them a run-first team.
Yeah, I'm not expecting much of a step forward. In fact, I know you guys know, as we talked about this when we ranked our quarterbacks for this year, I'm expecting to take a little bit of a step back. I could easily see the rushing thing you just mentioned with Lamar and him leading the team still with like 800 or 900 rushes. I don't expect him to be as efficient passing the ball. I still think he's going to be good. I mean, he proved last year he's a much better passer than a lot of us thought coming into this year. But a lot of the teams that he put up a lot of numbers against were bad teams. I do think that some of the, I brought this up, I don't think it was the quarter. I don't remember who I was arguing this with. May not even have been on this podcast. May have been on another one. But we saw that they can't be stopped.
That's kind of your hobby. You go on podcasts and argue with people.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. Love it. Just so much fun. But we saw Tennessee was able to do it last year, obviously, in the playoffs. But a game that a lot of people don't seem to remember is Week 3 last year when the Browns beat up Baltimore, I believe, in Cleveland. And they did the same thing. They were able to contain Lamar rushing the ball, and he proved that he couldn't beat him with his arm. I actually know it was this podcast. I remember arguing with Matt about it because I was talking about how he got a lot of his stats toward the end of the game. And I agree, garbage time points still matter for fantasy. But my point is like up until that really in the fourth quarter is when he kind of turned it on. And if teams can't do that, I don't expect him to be putting up 35 touchdowns on the least amount of passes and everything like you talked about. It's going to be harder for him to do because we do have a now full year of him in this offense. And while he is a dynamic player, he's an MVP. He's going to be in the MVP discussion this year, no doubt. Defense is having a full year of tape on you. I do think it gives them a little bit of a chance to figure out ways to stop you. Now, will they be able to do that? I don't know, but I do think they'll be able to slow down that passing attack just a little bit to kind of bring Lamar back, as I mentioned, a little bit. I think I have him at 5 was where I ranked him. So I don't expect a huge drop-off for them, but I do expect them to come back a little bit. I agree with what you said. Hollywood Brown's got to be healthy. Can someone else step up next to Brown? And we'll obviously talk about that as we continue going through this team. So their new additions this year, they brought Gus Edwards back on a one-year deal. They drafted J.K. Dobbins in the second round, Devin Duvernay in the third, James Prochet in the sixth, and a guy that I just want to throw on the bottom. He may not eventually be anything for him, but I did like him in college. Jacob Breland joined the team out of Oregon as an undrafted free agent. He is on what is it? Is it IR? I can't remember the PUP list because he's still recovering from an ACL injury. He tore his ACL toward the end of his last year with Oregon. So he's a guy that I really like, but not someone you need to really focus on. But I do like to talk about him.
He's technically on the non-football injury list.
Yeah.
Because his football injury didn't happen in the NFL.
Yeah, correct. All right, so their losses this year, they lost Seth Roberts, and their expiring contracts are Willie Snead and Gus Edwards. Willie Snead, I don't think is a big one, but Gus Edwards could be an interesting one, especially for a player we'll talk about here in a little bit. Their fantasy finishes last year, Lamar is QB1 with 421.68 points. Mark Ingram, RB11, 242 with 0.5. Gus Edwards, RB52 with 92.6 points. Marquise Hollywood Brown, wide receiver 46 with 146.4. Willie Snead, wide receiver 74, 95.1. And Mark Andrews, tight end 5 with 207.2 points. So Lamar not only had a good rushing season, but as we just talked about, statistically, a very good passing season. Kind of feel like we both answered this just a minute ago, but just to kind of just double touch on it, make sure here. Do you expect him to continue to get better at that, possibly take a step back? How do you see just passing specifically going for Lamar this year?
Well, I think in the interest of balance, they'll probably have a few more attempts. So if he rushes 40 fewer times, I feel like he's probably going to pass the ball 30 or 40, maybe even 50 more times. But he had a lot of pretty big plays last season. I like you. I still think, you have him at 5. I think I had him at 2. And I think Matt had him at 2 as well. So, we expect him to have a good season still. He's still going to run the ball. He's going to elude tacklers when it comes to avoiding sacks. And he has shown the ability to extend plays and make some plays down the field. He just needs some more weapons to be able to take that next step in the passing game. Once he gets there, and that offensive line, losing potential Hall of Famer Marshall Yanda is a big blow to that offensive line. So it's going to be interesting to watch. I just don't think that touchdown percentage is going to hold up. Yeah. He could still have 30 touchdowns, but if he does it in 450 passes instead of 400 passes, and ends up with roughly the same amount of yardage, it's going to be considered a step down from last year. He had a phenomenal year last year.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at with it as well. It's funny to say this because I think we all expect a little bit of a step back from him just because he had such a good year. It's not necessarily a bad thing. We're not saying Lamar Jackson's a bad player or that he can't continue to be great. It's just we don't expect him to do that, which I think is fair. And we all said that about Patrick Mahomes. And then he goes out there, and if he doesn't dislocate his knee and only miss like a week, it seemed like, he probably still would have put up close as numbers as he did, which is incredible to say. But I agree with you on that, and I don't think that if he was to, say, still throw for 30 touchdowns, as you mentioned, but it comes on more attempts, still around the same yards, is a bad thing for him. I just think, like I said, it's a little bit of a step back for him. It's not going to be a huge thing. Like I said, I could be dead wrong on when I ranked him at 5, and he could easily be the QB 1 or 2 again this year. Would not surprise me at all. I just think he does take a little bit of a step back. I think they want to protect him a little bit more and keep him he's definitely the player they're building around. They very smartly built that offense around his skill set, and we also didn't see him take a lot of big hits last year. I do think with the way him and that offense kind of paraded around with as good as they were, and they deserve because they were lights out. I do think defenses want to come after him a little bit more this year, and someone will be looking to kind of lay that big hit on Lamar. And if he starts to pile up more and more of them, do we see something happen like with RG3, where all of a sudden RG3 is dynamic, takes a bunch of big hits, and then all of a sudden those injuries start to pile up? So I do think they will try to move away from that and kind of allow the team around Lamar to help him more than having everything on Lamar's shoulders like they did last year. We do know that the Ravens can get out of Ingram's contract after this year. So do you think that this is the final year for Mark Ingram with the Baltimore Ravens?
Well, they're on the hook for $5 million if they keep him for next year. And only, I believe, $1.3 million in dead cap if they cut him. So the dead cap is not going to be difficult to overcome. I do think it's going to be his last year because I think he's going to believe he's going to have a decent year, 800-900 yard season, and he's going to say, I would have had more if you look at Dobbins and his 800 or 900 yards. If they just gave me the ball more, I'd have had 1,400 yards. So he'll be looking to go somewhere where he can get the ball. It's easy to forget that even though he's 29, going to be 30 next season, he's getting up there, but early on in his career, he split time with Alvin Kamara for 3 seasons. And so he was able to not take the beating because he had a pretty dynamic back to split the ball with. So he doesn't have the mileage and the wear and tear on his legs and his body that some other 30-year-olds do. So he's going to be looking to stay around that $4 or $5 million mark. If Justice Hill, who's on a rookie contract, shows well, it may give the Ravens the opportunity to go, well, look, we've got this young guy. He's going into his third year next year. We can bring in a veteran. There's gonna be plenty of veterans that they can bring in for $1 million. Probably Carlos Hyde. He'd be a great one next season. He's hitting that. Let me get on the totem pole and let me move. I'll take $1 million and I'll just be there and I'll be ready to go when you need me. And I think if Dobbins has a good year this year, like we expect, I think that's where they're going to be next year's. They're going to turn the reins over to Dobbins. They're going to bring Edwards back because he fits that system, and they can get him. I think he's at $685,000 this year with no dead cap. They can bring him back next year for $850,000, $900,000. He'll get his 100 carries. He'll perform in garbage time when they get up ahead, and so it'll help balance that team out.
Yeah, I think it's funny that you said that about Ingram because that's kind of the exact same thing Frank Gore was just saying today, too, that he felt like he could have been a 1,000-yard rusher last year had the Bills just given him the ball. And I agree with you. I think Ingram could be saying the same thing at the end of this year because we haven't – I think last year was the first year we've really seen him be a full bell cow. I mean, Edwards had a role, but it was mostly Mark Ingram, and he did a phenomenal job. He seems to have always split time in New Orleans, and then obviously when he came over here last year to Baltimore, it was his show for the most part, but Edwards did have a role. You did mention, obviously, that he's a guy that played decent for them, and they could easily bring him back, but with the role that Edwards had last year, they did re-sign him, as I mentioned earlier, to that one-year deal with team options and everything. Do you think that role goes to Dobbins now instead of Edwards, or do you think maybe Edwards starts with it and then it moves to Dobbins with the weird offseason? How do you see that second running back spot coming in behind Mark Ingram?
Well, I do think Ingram is going to give up touches. Edwards is still going to have a role, but Dobbins is going to cut into Edwards' touches, and he's going to cut into Ingram's touches. And he's going to, they're basically, I feel like they're going to take some touches from Lamar Jackson, some touches from Mark Ingram, some touches from Gus Edwards, and they're going to give them to Dobbins. And then if Dobbins starts looking really good, he's going to be the guy getting the ball. He's young, he's dynamic, and they drafted him as their future lead back. It's up to him as to when that future is. I think if it was Gus Edwards, I don't think they would have spent the draft capital on Dobbins. Or if it was Mark Ingram, they wouldn't have spent that draft capital on Dobbins. So I think we could see by the end of the season, Ingram being that guy who's the starting running back, but Dobbins being the guy who plays the most snaps.
Okay. Yeah, I don't disagree with you on that. I think for me, I think they are going to lean heavily on Mark Ingram, but I also could see them doing exactly what you're talking about. Like we saw it a lot last year too. Like when they got up, they were very smart about it, pulling out a lot of their starters because there were a lot of games that they would get up fairly, 3-4 touchdowns nearing the end of the third quarter, start of the fourth quarter. And then they would pull out Lamar, they'd pull out Ingram and allow those other guys to go in and get playing time. And I do think if Dobbins, I think it is going to be Dobbins. I don't think it's going to be Gus Edwards that they send out there. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do lean heavier on Dobbins than they do Edwards. I'm with you. I do think it's a mixture of carries. So I was trying to think of what's a good number. So what would you, for Dobbins, what would you put over under like 95 carries this year? You think it's an easy over? You think it's right around 95? What do you think it would be for Dobbins?
Well, I'm pretty comfortable with the over. Okay. It's what Edwards had. Ingram only had 202.
Yeah.
Jackson had 176. Edwards had 133.
Okay.
So if you take,
I didn't realize Edwards had so many.
Yeah, if you take, 40 from Edwards, 40 from Jackson, and 40 from Ingram, you're at 120.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. So I'm actually expecting a big year for Marquise Hollywood Brown. He came in last year with the Liz Frank injury in his foot. A lot of people, I think, kind of forget about that because he did come out and kind of start off on fire, obviously, against the Miami Dolphins. I know he had the 2 long touchdown passes. Looked good at times, but did struggle throughout the year. Some of that, I'm sure, just rookie struggles. But I do think the foot injury played into that a little bit. So what are you expecting from him? Do you expect him to take a giant leap forward, just a step forward, possibly even a step back? What are you expecting out of Hollywood Brown in 2020?
Well, he had 71 targets, caught 46 passes. It's interesting because he did have those big plays, but he only had a 12.7 yards per reception. So he caught plenty of short passes as well in that run. He did play in 14 games, so it wasn't like he missed a ton of games and started 11. I think last season it was just a function of being a rookie and that offense running through Lamar Jackson's legs. I expect him to hit the 100 target mark this year. Like I said, I think Jackson's pass attempts go from 400 to probably 450, and Andrews will still get his 100 targets. If Jackson gets 100 targets, or not Jackson, Brown gets 100 targets. That's right where I think they'll be. So I could see Marquise Brown, if he holds true to his 65% catch rate, 65 receptions for 1,000 yards, 6 or 7 touchdowns. He had 7 touchdowns last year.
Yeah.
Even though it seemed like he didn't play a lot, it just feels like he missed so much time, but yet he still played in 14 games, started at 11, had 7 touchdowns. It was just simply a function of that team not passing the ball much, and when they did, going to Mark Andrews.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised by all that too. And I think some of it was he definitely, I know for sure he had a couple games where he had like 2 touchdowns. So that obviously helps when you're getting up multiple touchdowns in games. But I am expecting a little bit of a bigger year from him just because of what you mentioned. We both expect Lamar to throw the ball more. And outside of Andrews, Hollywood Brown is their next best target, or it's going to be the guy that Lamar leans on the most. We saw they had a pretty good connection deep at times last year. But as you mentioned, I do like the fact that he's not just a deep threat. He was catching a lot of short route balls as well. So I do think it's going to be heavily him and Mark Andrews. Will we see a guy like Boykin carving out a role this year? He was a guy we both liked last year, thought maybe he could be that red zone target for them as they really didn't have anyone outside of Mark Andrews. Could you see that happening for Boykin this year, or do you expect another player to possibly take a step forward? Maybe not be a huge, fantasy asset because they do have Mark Andrews there with Brown, but someone that could step up for us guys in deeper leagues that could be like a wide receiver 3.
Yeah, I think Boykin is the favorite to do that right now. I know Duvernay is a hot rookie name. But if you look at the target distribution, Andrews had 98 targets last year, but Boyle and Hurst had over 80 targets last year. So they had 180 targets to their 3 tight ends. I feel like Boyle is probably going to stay flat with his 43 targets, but Hayden Hurst's 40 targets are going to go somewhere, and I think that that's going to be the Miles Boykin, Hollywood Brown. They're going to the wide receivers. I like Boykin. He's a different type of receiver than Brown. He's the down the field, big contested catch guy. And I know that Andrews is that big guy who gets down the seam and can make contested catches. Andrews, he's not athletic like Boykin is. Boykin has that physical profile of a number 1 wide receiver. I don't think he really will achieve that. I I think he'll be a good complementary receiver to Andrews and Brown. But Brown is going to be their number one. So I think Brown will push for 100 targets. And then you're going to have Boykin in that 60, 65 target range. It'll just depend on, do they go to Boykin in the end zone? I mean, last year they had 17 touchdowns to Andrews and Brown. And if we expect Lamar to regress by 6 to 30, that's going to make it a little more difficult for Boykin to be too high up on the totem pole there.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the one thing that sucks as possible. If Lamar does regress with the touchdowns, I'm with you though on Boykin over Duvernay. I mean, I like Duvernay. He obviously had a phenomenal senior season for Texas last year. But the one thing I've said multiple times, I do think he's definitely going to be a really good slot wide receiver. I just see him and Andrews kind of playing in the same area of the field for the most part. And when it comes down to it, I think Lamar's going to go to Andrews 9 times out of 10 compared to Duvernay just because of the chemistry they've already built. And Andrews can do stuff after the catch as well. He's a phenomenal athletic tight end. So I'm not expecting much out of Duvernay. Boykin gives them something completely different than all the rest of their wide receivers, which is why I'm with you. I do like Boykin. I would love to see a step forward from him this year. Like I said, we both liked him a lot last year. We're hoping maybe he could take a step last year. It just didn't happen. Could possibly happen this year. This is more for you because I know you're high on him. How high do you think Andrews can go this year? Can he finish as one of those top 2 tight ends?
I have him at tight end 1.
I've
had him there. I'm going to stick to it.
Yeah, I'm not.
Mark Andrews.
I am with you. I think I had him at 2 right behind Kittle, or maybe I had him at 3. I can't remember. I don't know if I had Kelsey ahead of him or not, but I'm on him. But he was one of the guys that I don't want to say it was a great call because I feel like there were obviously other people, but we were both very high on Andrews last year coming into the year. And then him obviously this year, I don't expect any kind of regression from him. He's just too damn good. I expect him to easily continue to be right up there toward the top. Whether he drops to 3, I don't expect him to drop much more past that. I do think he's up there in that top tier of elite tight end. So over-unders for the Ravens, Lamar Jackson, QB2 in 2020.
Yeah, that's what he's going to be, is QB2.
So you're going to go over, under.
Well, I have him at 2, so it's pretty hard. I think Mahomes is going to be 1, and I think Lamar is going to finish ahead of Dak, who is 3. So I guess I'm going to give him 2.5.
So you got to go under. Okay, fair enough. Or no, is it over? See, I forget. Where's Matt Fox? I need Matt Fox. What it is. I need Fox here to tell me what over and under is. I can't remember if over is good, under is bad.
If I have to choose over or under, I'm going to take the over, and say that the possibility of the Cowboys throwing the ball more could push Dak up above him.
Yeah, I'm going over as well. Like I said, I had him at QB5, so that was kind of a easy one for me. Wouldn't be surprised if he finishes 2, but he's 5 for me right now. His ADP is 20.33. He is the second QB off the board, just ahead of him, Mahomes. So, I feel like this is probably just a pick your poison thing in your drafts. Do I have 8 shares of Mahomes or 7 shares of Mahomes? Not 7 hairs of Mahomes, 7 shares. But how would you split it up? Would you always take Mahomes over Lamar? Would you try and split it up some to diversify? What would you do?
I'm probably 60-40 Mahomes over Jackson. Could be 70-30, but I do like Mahomes better as a prospect long term. So I would have out of 10 teams, I'm probably 6 to 7 Mahomes, 3 to 4 Jackson.
Yeah, I'm with you for the most part. If Baker's still on the board, I'm probably taking Baker over Lamar. But if he's gone, then I'll definitely go Lamar Jackson. I'm just kidding, by the way. But I do love me some Baker. So just after Lamar is Watson, Murray, or Prescott. Would you ever really take any of those 3 over Lamar? Is it one of those things where you're 10 teams and you've got 8 or 9 shares of Lamar? Would you ever just be like, you know what? Let's take one of these guys just for fun, or is it always just going to be Lamar for you?
Well, let's say it's 11 teams, and one of those will be Dak.
Gotcha.
I can make the case for Dak based on them throwing the ball more, his weapons being just better weapons for the most part, and having more of them. So it is something where I look at it and think, occasionally, 10% of the time I might take Dak, 30% of the time I'll take Lamar, and 60% of the time I'll take Mahomes.
Yeah, I think something I've learned on here as doing this is a little bit of a therapy session with you and Mr. Fox is you got to diversify. You cannot have Baker on all of your teams because when Baker sucks, your team sucks. So
you just can't start him every week on all of your teams.
Well, that's the problem. It's like I'm one of those single QB guys, and then it ends up screwing me. So I would definitely diversify. I agree with you on Prescott. I actually probably would if I was in that situation with, as you mentioned, like 11 teams. I probably would grab a share of Watson. I would grab a couple of Murray, but I am a lot higher on him than I know you are, just because I think he can kind of replicate what Lamar did. He's not as fast or as shifty as Lamar, but I think he's right up there above the Russell Wilsons and the Dax is a really good runner. I think it's Lamar separates himself, and then it's Kyler Murray right there under him. So if he can kind of improve that passing and that offense and get a little bit better, I think Murray could be really good. So I would definitely grab a couple shares of him as well. Watson, I think, too, is right there with Murray in that rushing group. But outside of that, I think it's mostly Lamar. You're going to take Lamar more often than not over those other guys. So Mark Ingram, RB16 in 2020, over or under?
I have the over.
As do I. ADP of 91.17. He is the 32nd RB off the board, just ahead of him. Keyshawn Vaughn, Raheem Mostert, and Chris Carson. Would you take him over any of those three?
I'd take him over Mostert and probably Vaughn. I can. Again, it's how's my team looking with the build? If I've got 4 running backs, I'm probably taking Vaughn. I'm always taking Ingram over Mostert right now, but I'm going to take Carson over Ingram.
Oh, sorry for the podcasting audience there. My son is right here. I was trying to help him with his game.
Hey, buddy.
So I'm with you. I would take him over Mostert, and I probably take Carson and Vaughn over him. Carson is interesting to me. I like Carson. Obviously, he's got a good setup there in Seattle as being the lead guy, but I didn't notice until I was doing some drafts this year, and I've got him in a couple of my C2C leagues because he's been falling so late. He's on the last year of his contract, and so I'm kind of curious as to if Seattle will re-sign him or not. So if he goes somewhere else, I don't know if he'll get the opportunity he has in Seattle. So Carson worries me a little bit, but in the long run, I'd probably still take him over Ingram because he's got that age factor, and I do think even if he ends up going in somewhere as like maybe the backup at the time, someone gets hurt, Carson could easily come in and be the guy for that team. Just after him, Ronald Jones, Alexander Madison, and Tariq Cohen. Would you take him over any of those three?
I'm taking all of them after Ingram. I just think Ingram he's gonna be over the next 2 to 3 years a fairly consistent RB3. I just feel like he doesn't fumble. He's a very capable pass catcher. Yeah. And he's a super good teammate. He's the kind of guy people want on their team. And I think that makes it easy for coaches and GMs to go, hey, let's bring this guy in. I know we've got this marginal starter, but we know Ingram isn't going to come in here and shit in the middle of the locker room and make all this chemistry shit worse. He's going to come in and he's going to help prop that guy up. And he's going to earn whatever his share is, and he's going to push the team to be better because of how he is. So I think I like Ingram over all three of those guys.
Yeah, the only one would be close for me would be Madison if I own Cook. If I had Cook, I'd probably take Madison just because I want to make sure I've got him. We know Madison will likely be the guy if Cook goes down, and so I'd want to have that kind of backfield short up there. J.K. Dobbins, RB28 in 2020, over or under?
I think he's going to be over. Like I said, just because there's going to be a decent amount of sharing of the ball there in Baltimore.
I agree. The only way I would see him being under is if he ends up vulturing a ton of touchdowns. If they end up just for whatever reason they get Mark Ingram has a bunch of big runs, and then as he gets down there, they pull him and they put Dobbins in there. I can see him jumping over that. Other than that, I think he's going to be right around 30 to 32. I don't expect him much under 28, but I do expect him to be under that. ADP of 26.5. He is the 14th RB off the board. Just ahead of him, Austin Eckler, Derrick Henry, and Miles Sanders. Would you take him over any of those three?
No.
I would take him over all three.
As big an Ohio State fan as I am, Eckler is probably the closest one for me. But your ADP of 26, I'm looking for a starter. That's 302. So if I'm going three running backs, or even if I go wide receiver heavy, I'm still going wide receiver heavy there, and I'm going to take the better value at wide receiver at pick 26, and wait even later on running backs. If I go two running backs, I'm probably not going to go with a rookie running back as my third RB.
Yeah, I would take him over all three just because we know you're not getting much out of him this year, but we both think he's going to be the future in Baltimore, and I just think in that kind of run scheme, we saw how good he could be with Justin Fields in Ohio State. And as much as it pains me to admit this, Lamar Jackson's probably better at that RPO than Justin Fields is. So I think Dobbins could be an absolute stud moving forward. So you maybe sacrifice this year a little bit to get Dobbins in the long run. So I would take him over all three. As much as I love Sanders, I would still take him over all three. Just after him, DeAndre Swift, Aaron Jones, and Kenyon Drake. Would you take any of those three over Dobbins?
So I'm probably taking Jones and Drake, just because I expect. I just don't have the faith in the third round at 302 that I'm going to get the production out of Dobbins that's going to help me win versus what I'm going to get from Drake and Jones. I don't think Jones is going to get 19 touchdowns this year, but he could get 12 or 14. If A.J. Dillon, was a goal line back and a short yardage back, we'd have probably seen it when he was at Boston College against weaker competition.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, man, see, Jones is probably the closest for me. Technically, you could argue him and Drake are both kind of on 1-year deals. I mean, Jones's contract is up this year. Drake on the transition tag. I actually like Swift. I was actually doing a little bit of research into this weekend, and I don't think it's going to be quite the committee everybody else does. That they've actually used more of a one-back system the entire time Matt Patricia's been there, and when Bevel came over last year, like the carry. What's the word I want to use here?
The starting running back tends to get the majority of the carries.
It's by a lot more than people think. Like everybody thinks, because I heard someone talking about today with how big Bo Scarborough was last year. That was when Kerryon Johnson got hurt. Like when Kerryon was the guy, the difference was Kerryon was getting like 18 carries compared to 6. That's a pretty big difference. Then when Kerryon got hurt, Bo Scarborough started getting more. And even when Kerryon came back, he was still getting a couple more carries than Bo Scarborough, even though Scarborough had done a really good job of pretty much carrying the team while Johnson was out. So I think Swift is going to be – a lot of people are fading him because they just expect some kind of split committee backfield thing. But when Patricia first came over, it was Marshawn Lynch. He was out carrying everybody. Then they went to – hang on, I don't know. I want to pull it up now because I did like a whole deep dive into this thing. I have all kinds of notes on it. I was debating on where'd I do with it? Debating on writing an article about it for Dynasty Nerds. And so when you had Michelle and Rawls in there, their splits where Michelle was getting a lot, so he got hurt. Then Rawls came in and had a huge bunch of carries. Even Lacey was way above everybody, and so he got hurt. Mike Davis, like the carry splits was just ridiculous. Like Lacey in 3 games had 69 carries. The next closest was Mike Davis, who had 68 carries. That was 5 games. So that in Lacey's 3 games, 2 games less, he still had 1 more carry than Davis. Like, it's not as split backfield as people seem to think it was in Detroit. I don't understand it. Or not Detroit. That was when Bevel was with Seattle. I was trying to go back and look at Bevel's different stuff. But it's just insane to me that people seem to think it's going to be this committee backfield. All that to say, I would still take Dobbins over all 3. Jones would be a coin flip for me because I love Aaron Jones, and there's a lot of chatter that the Green Bay Packers are looking to possibly re-sign him. I think if they can get a good deal for him, I think they should. He's obviously proved he can be a really good back for them, especially when he's healthy. So he would be the closest one for me. I'd probably go Dobbins just because as this shirt says, you Buckeye fan, I just can't. I draft with my heart too much, as we've mentioned on this podcast many a times. So Marquise Hollywood Brown, wide receiver 16 in 2020, over or under?
I'm going to say over.
As am I, but I'm by not much. I think I had him in our ranks a lot lower than I think I'm going to eventually have him. I've really kind of come around on him as the more I've looked at him. I think he could finish close to 16, but I'm going to take the over for now as well. ADP of 63.83. He is the 32nd wide receiver off the board. Just ahead of him, Deebo Samuel, Tyler Boyd, and Stephon Diggs. Would you take him over any of those 3?
It's close with Deebo. I'm kind of falling in and out of love with Deebo.
Yeah.
I don't think I think Diggs' volume is going to rival Brown's volume, so I would probably lean Diggs just because I know I'm more comfortable with what I'm getting. But I'm probably taking Boyd over the other 3, all 3 of them.
Yeah, I think I'd probably take him over Diggs and Samuel. I mean, Samuel worries me a little bit. I love Samuel. He just seems to be injured a lot, and I'm really worried about it. Again, another year coming in and being hurt already to start off the year. And I agree with you on Diggs. I do think that they're going to have the same kind of amount of volume. The difference is I think Hollywood Brown's a little bit more explosive. And so I think he could probably get you a couple more of those long touchdowns. I don't think Diggs necessarily gets you. Obviously, Brown a lot faster than Diggs, so I'd give him a little bit more upside on that. But I am with you on Boyd as the easy smash over all of them for me as well. Just after him, Michael Gallup, Jarvis Landry, and Devontae Parker. I think easily take Landry over him just because that dude is like right here. He's going after wide receiver 32, and yet he always finishes as like a top 16 wide receiver in PPR scoring. And Gallup, I think, would be a coin flip for me. I'm really liking Gallup with his ADP and what I think he could do this year for the Cowboys. What about you?
Yeah, I'm definitely taking Landry. I have Landry at wide receiver 24, so I expect he's going to substantially outperform Brown. Gallup is one of my crushes from last year, and, he had a 1,000-yard season. That team is, Dallas is going to be – I think they're going to have a powerful offense this year. Unless something goes haywire, if all their quarterbacks get hurt and Kellen Moore
it's going to be Dax
come out of retirement. If Kellen Moore has to come out of retirement or something, I feel like Gallup is going to have a good year. Better than Brown at wide receiver 16? I don't think so. I think if Brown does end up at wide receiver 16, I think Gallup is they're right neck and neck. And Parker, I just don't. I haven't bought into the consistency of the 5th-year breakout yet. I just can't buy that yet.
No, I'm with you. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm fine missing on Parker because if he does prove me wrong, I mean, good for him. Obviously, I don't wish anything bad for any of these guys, but I need to see it again with Parker. We've seen 4 years, as you mentioned, of him not doing anything, and then he finally breaks out. You're going to have to show me again before I'll believe that that's actually who you are. And I'm with you on the Preston Williams train. I mean, I think he's going to easily be one of the better wide receivers there as well. So, I'll pass up on Parker's Parker's ADP there, and then grab Preston Williams like 4 rounds later and be just fine with it. Mark Andrews, tight end 2, over or under?
Under. I'm sticking to it.
Over, right?
Tight end,
Over's
tight
good.
end one.
Yeah, over's good, under's bad, right? I can't remember now. That's what I said. We need Fox here. I don't know. I think we've been going back and forth. So you've got a tight end one.
And as much as I love that call, there is concern on my part about that with Kelsey just getting the volume. Kelsey has a dynamic quarterback. So if Kelsey finishes tight end one again, it's not going to surprise me one bit. I think that Kittle is going to have the same volume issues that Andrews is going to have. But I like him. I'm going to stick with my tight end one.
Yeah, I'm going to go – since I have to choose here, I'm going to go under just because I could see, as you just mentioned, Kelsey and Kittle kind of jumping up and doing their thing. But I would not be surprised if he finishes one or two. I think he's – you just mentioned it, Kelsey getting all the volume. I could honestly see Andrews getting all the volume this year, especially if we think that Lamar's passing increases this year. It just means likely more targets, more catches, possibly even more touchdowns for Andrews. He has an ADP of 38.83. He is the third tight end off the board. So, dynasty startup, Kelsey, Kittle, Andrews. Kelsey, Kittle are the only ones going ahead of him. Would you take him over either one of those two for a dynasty startup?
Yes. It's a little closer. It's more of a 5-3-2 kind of split amongst my 10 teams, with honestly Kelsey being the least owned, the least rostered, just because of his age. Kittle is younger. Andrews is younger. Oddly enough, of the three, Kittle is the only one I don't have rostered anywhere.
I've got him in a couple places, but that's because of dynasty leagues where I took him, obviously, coming out in the draft, because he was one of those guys people kind of forget about. He was going to like third and fourth round of rookie drafts that year that he came out, because not a lot of people were talking about him. That's honestly the only reason I have him. I would almost say for me, it's like an 80-10-10 split for me. I've been ending up with Andrews more than the other two just because he's still going so much later. He's going like in round 4 or 5 compared to –
He's going as the tight end 3.
Yeah, and it seems, obviously, especially in tight end premiums, which we kind of seem to be playing a lot of now, Kelsey and Kittle are going in at the end of round 1 or early to mid round 2, and I just don't – I'd rather take a guy like Andrews 3 rounds later because he's still going to bring back their value and is 3 rounds later. So you're still kind of being able to get those top running backs and wide receivers. But I am with you on the Kelsey being my lowest one. Like if I had to split that better, it'd be 80-15-5. I still love Kittle, and I think he's the best of the 3. And Kelsey, while he's older, I know he just got the new contract, but I do expect him to not necessarily fade as in like fall off the map, but I do expect him to sooner rather than later not be one of those top tight ends like Andrews and Kittle. I could easily see Andrews, Kittle being like up in that top group for like the next 5-6 years, where I could see Kelsey maybe 3 more years, 4, but then slowly start to fade off. Kind of like what we've seen with Zach Ertz. Ertz has been up there, and then last year he started to come down a little bit, not much, but he dropped down into that 4-5 range. I kind of think we see the same thing with Kelsey in a couple years. Well,
Kelsey was clearly feeling the heat from Ricky Seals-Jones because he had him Tanya Harding, Nancy Kerrigan.
Yeah. So after him, where'd my list? Oh, Ingram, Ertz, and Waller. I would not take any of them over him. I would say that the interesting one for me, maybe. I don't even know how to word it. Ingram is interesting to me if I knew he could stay healthy, because I do think he can produce like Andrews can, but how much he's been injured is kind of what knocks him down to where I wouldn't do it. But what about you?
Yeah, I wouldn't take any of them. Ingram, I actually have him all the way down to my tight end 8 because I don't trust him. If he falls to where the tight end 8 is going, which I'm not sure where that is, then I'm like, okay, well, I'll take him. But I'm not interested in Ingram. For that price, I'd rather go with Darius Slayton. I'll wait and take Slayton as my wide receiver. And I don't hate Ertz and Waller. Waller is another one of those guys that, he transitioned. It took a while. Now he's a full-blown tight end, and he had a great season last year. But some of it, how much of it was because there was literally everybody out wide got injured at some point and missed a bunch of time there in Oakland. Now that they're in Vegas, they added 3 wide receivers in the draft. They signed a couple free agents. That makes me a little bit nervous about Waller. I'm still in on Ertz. I think Ertz is, he's going, I think, typically as a tight end 4. And if you can get him in the 7th or 8th round, late 6th, maybe I might grab him if I'm at the back end of the 6th round. But for the most, I'm not taking any of them over Andrews, no.
Yeah. All right, so the Pittsburgh Steelers, they finished 8-8 last year, obviously had a ton of issues at quarterback. They did miss the playoffs, so they were in it till the last week of the season. Would have made the playoffs had we been in the new format that we are in this year with the extra playoff teams getting in. Are we expecting Pittsburgh to pick up where they left off at the end of 2018 coming into the 2020 season?
Well, I think they're going to be as good as they ever were so long as Ben's elbow holds up. That's really what it's going to come down to is, can he still throw the ball? He looks good in practice. He looks fit. It looks like he's put some work in, and he's trimmer than he's been in years. They've got 3 good receivers in Juju and Johnson and Washington. So they have a good mix there. Adding Eric Ebron at tight end is, I think, been a highly underrated move. As a Detroit Lions fan, it doesn't get much more anti-Ebron than me. But I think I love the signing of Ebron in Pittsburgh. I think he could push for the type of numbers he had 2 years ago in Indianapolis.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's all obviously going to hinge on Ben and how that elbow is. We'll talk about it here in a little bit after we get some through this other stuff. But being as big a baseball fan as I am, coming back from Tommy John is not easy for these baseball guys. And the one thing I'll make the comparison to Ben is just like throwing of baseball or fastball, curveball, however you want to say it. It's the same thing as the football. It's not a natural motion that your arm is supposed to do. And the one thing with the Steelers is they do throw the ball 500, 600 times, which, something that you could talk about with baseball players, with them going out there and pitchers, whether it's a bullpen starting pitcher. They throw the ball a lot, and it takes time to work that up. It usually takes most MLB pitchers a little over a year to get back. And we're going to look at Big Ben's coming back not even a year later. So I do think that is a big deal. That's my biggest thing that I think this whole offense hinges on, because as we saw last year, Mason Rudolph's not the guy. Duck Hodges is not the guy. And if something happens to where Big Ben can't play, Pittsburgh, I think, is going to be in really bad shape again this year. Their new additions, I thought this was extremely interesting. Honestly, had no idea until I was doing the research for this. They signed Wendell Smallwood to a 1-year contract, so there's that. I don't really know what that means. They drafted Chase Claypool in the 2nd round, who everybody's going crazy over now because of the catch he made today in their first padded practice. Did you see that?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm with you. I'm just saying everybody's going crazy over it. And then they drafted Anthony
ball over short guy. All right.
Yeah. And then Anthony McFarland in the 4th. They didn't have any key offensive losses, which is obviously good, but they're expiring contracts to very important players, in my opinion, Juju Smith-Schuster and James Conner. Their fantasy finishes, again, I really didn't see a point putting any other QB on here. I really probably even shouldn't have put Ben on here, but Ben finishes QB 53 with 13.74 points. Again, only played really in a game and a half. He didn't even finish playing that 2nd game. James Conner, RB 35, 145.5, only played in 10 games. Deontay Johnson, wide receiver 39, 163.1. James Washington, wide receiver 54, 133.5. Juju, wide receiver 65, 113.2. I think he only played in 9 games. I forgot to write that down, so I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. And then Ebron, tight end 27, 86.5. This was all with the Colts, obviously, last year. So as I mentioned, Tommy John, it's a very serious injury. What do you think that could mean for Ben? Do you think that he'll have any issues throwing it 500 times? Do you think they possibly move toward a more run-heavy offense, or you think it's just let it go? Ben's probably only got a couple years left. Let's just see what he's got.
Well, I think that how much they run the ball is going to be clearly dependent upon how healthy their running backs are. I know they like to run the ball. They like to have a balanced offense. But under Tomlin and Cowher and Knoll, it's historically been a run the ball type of team. They run the ball to set up the pass, and they're not shy about throwing the ball with Ben, as evidenced by his 500-plus pass attempts numerous times. So, it comes down to what type of throws. Is he going to end up being a dink and dunker? Is he going to trust the elbow? It'll be interesting to watch reports coming out of camp to see, does he really let it fly? I think you talked about baseball players taking a year and a half to recover. Probably 7 months, 6, 7, 8 months of that is mental. It's getting to the point where they're like, I know I can cut this loose and my arm is going to be okay. You do the surgery, you do the rehab, and then you just start building up the strength. And then you just have to get over that. Well, will it break if I do it? One of the pictures going around the internet right now is of Kerryon Johnson in practice wearing a knee brace. And everyone's like, oh, the knee isn't healed. And so many times it just comes down to, how comfortable am I? I'm going to wear. Quarterbacks oftentimes wear knee braces after injuries for the rest of their career. So will Ben have the faith in that arm?
Yeah, I don't. Just to touch on the carry-on thing, I'm not worried about it. I heard them talking about it today, and someone brought up a really good point on Sirius XM radio, and I agree with them. I think a lot of those guys are going to be wearing braces and everything just because this completely different offseason than they've ever experienced. They're going to have less practice time and everything. We've already seen it today. Multiple players coming out with soft tissue injuries. AJ Green with the hamstring. There was other players who had different soft tissue injuries. If you can wear a knee brace to kind of help make sure you don't do anything to your leg, I'm going to wear the knee brace right now because it's just practice. So I'm not reading anything into that, and I do agree with you. I almost think they have to lean a little bit heavier on the run game. I could be wrong. I said I'm not a doctor. I should have reached out to Fantasy PT Matt and asked him what he thought about this because he obviously does a really good job. Now, we've had him on here before. He knows his stuff. I really should have tried to reach out to him and ask him before we did this today, just his thoughts on what that could mean, because I said as a big baseball fan, Tommy John's the one thing I can bring into this and just be like, man, I just don't see him being able to sling it 500, 600 times and being okay. So I do think they'll at least have to lean on the run a little bit. But that does bring us to an interesting conundrum here. You brought up the fact that they would lean on the run game probably more if they knew everybody could be healthy. Connor's already suffered injuries his entire career. Samuels looked ineffective last year after looking good his rookie season. They do have Snell and McFarland probably competing for that third role here. So what exactly are you doing for this backfield when it comes to fantasy?
Well, if I can get Connor cheap as my RB3, I don't mind that. I've got him in one spot. I have him as an RB2 on the team. Even in 10 games last year, he only averaged 11.6 carries per game, and he only had 38 targets. Pittsburgh historically likes to favor. You were talking about Darrell Bevel and the misnomer that he likes a committee. Pittsburgh is very much the same way. They want one guy to handle the load, and whoever it's going to be. I think that surprised a lot of people when Benny Snell stepped in. They're like, oh well, Snell will get first and second down, and somebody else will get third down. But he didn't. It was Snell. They liked Snell. And from all reports I've seen so far, Snell has looked real good in practice this offseason as well. Snell clearly has limitations. He's not fast. He's not going to get fast. But he's a running back that has good vision. So as long as he's moving forward, I think he's going to be productive. Jalen Samuels, there's talk about him being on the outs. And I know a lot of people really like McFarland. And it's not that I hate McFarland, but I'm waiting to see, how much of what they love about him comes from that one Ohio State game. I mean, and maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just me as an Ohio State fan. That's etched on my memory, and whenever I hear the name, that's what plays in my head. I mean, last year against Ohio State, he didn't have near as good a game, but he was injured.
Yeah, just like when someone brings up Rondale Moore, just conjures memory or nightmares of what he did to us when they just beat the crap out of us there at Purdue. Yeah, if for fantasy wise, I'm probably, if we're talking dynasty startup or even probably redraft, I might just be leaning Snell just because he's the cheapest out of all of them. And I think obviously if Connor gets hurt, I think Snell could step in and probably do something. I am with you on Samuels. There's been a lot of talk that he may not even make the team, so I'm kind of completely fading him. And McFarland, I'm with you. I just see him more as a change of pace guy. I don't see him being a guy who's going to come in and carry it 20 times a game. Now, he could come in and give you some of those big plays. He might be a guy that, as like a dart throw flex here and there, if it ends up coming down to something where Connor's hurt, Samuel gets cut, and it's Snell and McFarland. Throw McFarland, you might get that 1 week where he gets you 20 points because he gets you a couple long touchdown plays, or he gets you like 5 because he gets you like maybe 50 yards on 13 carries or something like that. I'm not expecting a lot out of McFarland. I think Snell could be the future there. He's not. He's built like a prototypical back, but he just doesn't have the explosiveness that I liked. So I wasn't as high on him coming out last year. But I think if Connor gets hurt, it's going to come down to Snell and McFarland because I just don't think Samuel showed last year he can't carry the load at all. And so if I have to buy into one, it's Snell just because he's going so much later than the others. Damn it. I did not put his ADP on here. I'll look that up here in a minute, but I know he's going much later than the other, than at least Connor and Samuels are. So assuming Big Ben is back and at least, let's say, 80 to 95% or even 100% healthy, are you expecting a bounce back year from Juju?
Yeah. I mean, can't get a whole lot worse, can it?
No, it can't.
I mean, 70 targets and 42 catches after, I don't know that I don't think Juju is Antonio Brown. He's not going to be that level of receiver. He's not a guy that's going to challenge for top 5 every year. But Juju can be a top 15, top 18 guy every year. A lot of it is going to depend on, is there offensive balance, and is there somebody to occupy some of the other defensive backs? James Washington had a decent year last year. He led them in yards. He's a deep threat, bigger receiver. Deontay Johnson kind of came out, looked really well. I think he came out of Toledo. So there's, that transition from a small school to the NFL. So they do have the potential of 3 very, very good receivers. None of them actually being elite. So I think where Juju is being drafted and might be a little bit rich for my blood, but I do think that he can have a bounce back with Ben. And I think Ben is going to, Ben didn't really play with Deontay Johnson last year. And Washington was kind of still working his way up the depth chart when Ben was healthy the year before. So Juju is going to be the guy he's the most comfortable with.
So before I give my thoughts on Juju, Benny Snell, holy crap. He's going behind McFarland even. He's going as the fourth RB off that list. I thought he was going ahead of McFarland now. So he's RB 76 off the board, 224.6 is his ADP. That is ridiculous. So, yeah,
like
I'm definitely all in on Snell.
He's not somebody that's going to, he's not a set it and forget it guy.
Yeah.
But if something happens to Connor, he's definitely a flex-worthy guy on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, so that's a guy. I mean, look, what's 224? I mean, I'm horrible at math. Let's see here. 224 divided by 12 is what? That's 18 rounds. I mean, that's it. Like in my home redraft league, that's our last round right there. Like I'm easily taking a guy like Snell because the same thing. Connor has improved. He can stay healthy. And I don't think Samuels can be the guy. So if you're telling me you can get a guy like Snell, who again, he's not going to put up those RB 1 or 2 numbers, but a guy you could probably put in your flex every single week and be like, you know what? We know Pittsburgh's going to run the ball. If they get down toward the end zone, they're probably just going to hand the ball off to Snell and see what he can do. I'll take it all day over where you're getting guys like Connor and Samuel. So yeah, I'm definitely now all in on Benny Snell. As for Juju, I'm with you. We talked about this a little bit in our wide receiver episode a couple weeks ago. I think we all kind of got enamored with Juju that first year with Antonio Brown, and we all kind of, the numbers he put up were like, he's a 1. He's going to be a 1. When Antonio Brown left, we were like, hey, it's all right. They've got Juju. I've come back a little bit. I do think Juju is a really good 2, and I think he's proven that, and I expect him to come back and do that easily. Could he put up wide receiver 1 numbers? Absolutely, if they continue to throw the ball as much as they do and have in Big Ben there. But I do think Juju is likely shown that he is a high-end wide receiver 2, and there's nothing wrong with that because he does have that wide receiver 1 upside. I am curious. I didn't have this on here, but I'll ask you really quick. We have seen Pittsburgh has always been kind of very hesitant to pay their wide receivers. I think they've really only extended Antonio Brown, and they did it before that season started. They've been very open about they do not negotiate contracts during the year. So I kind of feel like we're already into that into the year mode. They haven't extended Juju. So do you think he could possibly be back with Pittsburgh next year, or he goes somewhere else?
I feel like he's going to have to go on a team-friendly deal. They are not going to offer him Antonio Brown kind of money. So if he's comfortable with top 15, top 18 wide receiver money, then I think they'll get the deal done in no time. But if he's sitting there going, well, you've seen me perform at a top 10 level, so I want top 10 money, Pittsburgh's going to go, we've seen a lot of players perform at top 10 level occasionally like you do. So we're gonna let you follow the path of Mike Wallace and Emmanuel Sanders and we've got
Holmes. Yeah, they've had a lot of good wide receivers leave there. Yeah. So yeah.
And they have a budget, they have a program, they have a plan. And unless you are truly, Hines Ward or Antonio Brown, they're not going to pay up for you.
And I'm going to say there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I hate giving the Steelers credit on anything. But the one thing I've always said about them, number one, they've always been a very class organization, and they have. And I would say this about Baltimore too. It's kind of the worst part about being a Browns fan is that Pittsburgh and Baltimore seem to have like some of the best front offices in the NFL every single year with how they approach everything. And so, if they don't pay Juju, I wouldn't be surprised because they seem to grab all these wide receivers. And they're the wide receiver U, if you want to use a college term, like with
right.
DBU and all this. Like, they always seem to find these wide receivers and be able to grow them and produce them. And so if they don't pay Juju, I have no doubt that means they just really believe in Deontay Johnson, Washington, Claypool, and there's someone else that they drafted I can't think of off the top of my head at the moment. But that just means they believe in those guys, and I'm going to trust them because they have that proven track record. As we just talked about, all those guys that have come through them drafting them. None of those guys they traded for anything. They all drafted and produced those guys. So everybody is kind of on the Deontay Johnson breakout this year. It seems like that's kind of everybody and their mother knows about. That was Chris Godwin last year. Everybody said Chris Godwin was going to break out. So this year it seems to be Deontay Johnson. Are you on that train that you think Deontay Johnson is going to be a breakout? And do you think that kind of ends the James Washington experiment, or do you think he has any kind of fantasy value?
Oh, I think Washington definitely has fantasy value. I think it's more along the lines of Deshaun Jackson. But as far as Deontay Johnson, it is a situation where when you see a team do something over and over and over when it comes to identifying players, eventually you just got to believe them. Now, is he going to be an elite talent? I don't know. He's going to be very good. I think we've seen that. And so let's buy into Deontay Johnson top 24 potential. That's where I'm at. I'm not ready to say, oh, he's elite. I think Pittsburgh is in a situation where they're going to have where Dallas has 3 potential elite wide receivers. Pittsburgh has 3 potential very good wide receivers. There's a separation amongst those 3. It'll be fun to watch because does Ben develop a chemistry with just one of them, or is he going to spread it around? Is he going to rely on Juju whenever he needs something from the slot? Is it going to be James Washington whenever he needs something deep? How interchangeable will the 3 of those guys get? Because while Washington is the biggest of the 3, it's not like he's not Mike Evans big.
Yeah.
And the other 2 guys, they're not like Julian Edelman small. So they're they're not that far apart in size. I don't know that Washington quite has the quickness to run some of the routes inside, but it's going to be, I could see all 3 of these guys, if Ben's elbow is good and he throws it, let's say 550 times, I could see all 3 of them finish in top 30, but none of them maybe finishing over top 18.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of in on James Washington. It's interesting. It's only his 3rd year in the league. I think people seem to think he's been in the league longer than he has been. He actually had a fairly good rookie season for a guy that played in a offense that's not conducive to the NFL whatsoever. Comes in, and I remember. So I don't remember if it was against the Browns or I'm pretty sure it was a primetime game. He runs the wrong route. He dives for a ball he wasn't supposed to. Big Ben is like chewing his ass out on the sideline, talking about how he's just not ready to be a wide receiver or a NFL starting wide receiver. Comes back last year and then obviously doesn't play with Big Ben much. He got stuck with Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph. I kind of feel like this could be a good year for him. We've talked about before, not every wide receiver breaks out that first year or second year. A lot of guys we saw it took that 3rd year to break out. This could be the year. You're going to have a lot of people focusing in on Juju, a lot of people focusing in on Deontay Johnson because everybody seems to think he's going to have a good year because he did step up and kind of become the guy last year with Juju down and with all the backup quarterbacks, still was able to make a pretty good year for himself. I think James Washington could have a quietly very good year here. He's a guy you can get late in drafts. My bet is I didn't put him on this ADP list either. I did, and he is going very late in these drafts. So he's a guy kind of like I just talked about with Snell. I might be targeting more than any of these other wide receivers just because he could end up having a good year, and I think with Juju moving on, he's going to be there for likely 2 more years. He could, or this year and next year, could be a guy that they kind of build around with Deontay Johnson, at least for the next couple of years. I know you mentioned Ebron earlier, but just kind of want to clarify for sure. You are all Ebron over McDonald?
Yeah. I guess, Vance broke my heart last year. It was just one of those, he looks good when he's good. Vance is good, but he's, he makes Evan Ingram look reliable with his health. So it's just a situation where I feel like Ebron will be the healthier. He's naturally a better pass catcher, and I just think he's going to get the playing time. And so I'm Ebron over McDonald.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think you mentioned it earlier. We were talking about what we expected from Pittsburgh this year. I easily could see the same thing you said. The Ebron we saw of the Colts a couple of years ago doing the same thing, just based on the situation he's in and where they will likely use him. So we are going to do over-unders now. So Ben, QB 19. I have the over on him. I'm obviously had a decent 2018. He's been good for the past couple of years, but I'm taking the over on him. I will continue talking as Dennis is handling something real quick. Or what do you got? Over or under?
So, I'm going to say, I feel like Ben's going to be around QB 15, so I'm going to say under.
Okay. Interesting. All right. He's got an ADP of 221.83. He's the 28th QB off the board. Just ahead of him, Teddy Bridgewater, Gardner Minshew, and Ryan Tannehill. Are you taking him over any of those three?
I'm probably taking him over Teddy and Minshew. I like Tannehill.
Yeah, I think I'd go somewhat the opposite way. I take him over Minshew and Tannehill. I've been all in on Teddy and the Panthers, so I can't give up on him now. So I'd take Teddy over Big Ben. Just after him, Jameson Winston, Tyrod Taylor, and Jordan Love. Would you take any of those three over Big Ben?
Nope.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Connor, RB20 in 2020, over or under?
Man, that's a good number. If he is healthy all season, I'm going to say under. I feel like he's a top 16 back if he stays healthy. So, and I am going to bet on health.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. If he stays healthy, I would go under easily there. If not, obviously, I'm not even just necessarily the over if it's only a couple games here and there. I think if he's beat up all year, he's just not going to put up the numbers. So if he's able to stay healthy, I am with you on that. ADP of 65.83. He is RB25 off the board. Just ahead of him, Devin Singletary, Kareem Hunt, and David Montgomery. Would you take him over any of those three?
I'd take him over Singletary. It's kind of a coin flip with Hunt, but I'm taking Montgomery out of the four of those guys.
Yeah, I think I would take Hunt and Montgomery. I think Singletary would be a coin flip for me. I think all three of their positions are somewhat safer than Connor at the moment. After Darius Geis, David Johnson, and Le'Veon Bell, would you take any of those three over Connor?
Definitely not taking Darius Geis.
Yeah.
I might take Bell. I feel like Bell is low-key going to have a really good year this year. And while I'm in on a David Johnson bounce back, I don't think he's going to be top 20. I think DJ will be around the RB2, RB3 line. But I'd take Bell over him.
I think I'd take Connor over all three of them. I'm with you. Bell would be the closest, but I'd probably lean Connor over those three. Juju, wide receiver 14 in 2020, over or under?
Over.
I will take the over, but just barely. I'm really kind of digging Juju this year. ADP 21.83, wide receiver 7 off the board. Just ahead of him, Hopkins, Godwin, and Moore. Would you take him over any of those three?
Nope.
Just behind him, Mike Evans, A.J. Brown, and Amari Cooper. Would you take any of those three over Juju?
Oh, I'd definitely take Mike Evans. I feel like Cooper's still in for a good year at, wide receiver.
Seven right now.
7.
That's, yeah.
I don't think I would take Brown or Cooper over him, but I don't think I'd take Brown or Cooper at wide receiver 7.
I'm with you. Yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah, Evans would be the one for me as well. Brown, Cooper. I think all three of those, Brown, Cooper, and Juju, are all kind of in the same group. I don't think any of us had any of them in the top 12. I don't expect any of them to finish around there. So I'd probably still go Juju, just because at that point I just like him a little bit more than I do Brown Cooper. Deontay Johnson, wide receiver 30 in 2020, over or under?
That's a good number. Let's see. I'm going to put it at slightly under, like 29.5.
All right. Yeah, I'm going to go under as well. I have him, I think, right around 26, 27. As much as I keep trying to fade away from the Deontay Johnson breakout, more and more people keep seeing to talk me into it. ADP of 82.33. He is wide receiver 40 off the board, just ahead of him. N'Keal Harry, my goodness, and Christian Kirk. Would you take him over any of those three?
I'd take him over Hardman. It'd be a coin flip with Kirk, but I like Harry a lot. I wouldn't take him over Harry.
Yeah, I think I'd actually probably take him over all three. I agree, even though I don't like Harry as much as you do, he would be a coin flip for me, but I'd probably go Johnson. Just after him, Ayuk, Brandon Cooks, and T. Higgins. Would you take any of those three over him?
Well, so let's see. We're at wide receiver 40.
This is 40. Yeah.
We're in the wide receiver 4s. So theoretically, I already have 3 wide receivers. So I'm probably going to take Johnson, Ayuk, and Higgins all over Cooks. And I'm probably – so Higgins probably isn't going to play. So do I want to spend that much capital on somebody that's going to get very little playing time? I don't know. I'm probably going Johnson over all 3 of them.
Yeah, for me, I'd probably go Ayuk and Higgins. I agree with you. Neither one of them is probably going to get much. Well, I think Ayuk could get some playing time this year. I agree with you on Higgins, though. But I think both of those are kind of the futures of their teams. Deontay Johnson might be the future of Pittsburgh, but I think the future of Pittsburgh is more bleak than the other two because I don't think Big Ben has much longer. And I think once Ben's gone, depending on the quarterback they bring in, they may not be quite as pass-heavy as they have been with Ben there. So give me Higgins and Ayuk. I love the pairing of Higgins and Burrow. I think those two are going to be good for a long time. My goodness, I don't know why I was about James Washington, wide receiver 42, over or under?
I'm going to give him a slight under.
As am I. As I mentioned just a minute ago, I'm kind of getting more and more here into James Washington having a good year. ADP 145. He is wide receiver 62 off the board. So just ahead of him, his teammate, Chase Claypool. Then you got Sterling Shepard and Julian Edelman. Would you take him over any of those three?
I'd definitely take him over Claypool. I have not bought into Claypool. Yeah. Edelman is a interesting situation. Well, he's getting towards the end of his career. He should get lots of volume still this year and probably next year. So I don't know. That's a little. That's a tough one. I'd have to look at my team closely. Yeah. You know, it comes. Do I need points more this year or can I wait? Shepard, I think I like Shepard over Washington.
All right. I would I think I'd take him over Shepard and Claypool. The only Edelman, I think I'd for sure go over him just because it's something we've always talked about. I'm always kind of, when I'm doing drafts, I'm expecting to, or at least hoping to compete that year. I think Edelman gives me that for the next 2 years as a competing top-end wide receiver because he still brings you that PPR value, and I think he can do that with Cam Newton. Shepard would be the coin flip because his health just worries me. We haven't seen any health issues with James Washington. It's just been a little bit of inconsistency. So Shepard, Washington, be a coin flip. Easily take him over Claypool, same as you there. John Brown, Golden Tate, and Alan Lazard are all going behind Washington. Would you take any of those three over him?
You know, I can't seem to buy into Alan Lazard.
Yeah.
As much as it seems like maybe he's the one to finally develop that wide receiver 2 chemistry with Aaron Rodgers. I just don't buy it. And so I feel like even though Washington is going to have some ups and downs as the deep threat, I feel like he's going to be more consistent than Lazard. I'm not into John Brown. Golden Tate, I'm probably taking Golden Tate. I feel like there's at least one more year of Golden Tate.
All right. Yeah, I think Tate would be the coin flip one for me. I just don't know what to think with Lazard. I mean, I think everybody's buying into him because of how much Aaron Rodgers likes him. And obviously, as we've talked about before, that's a big deal for Green Bay. If Rodgers likes you, you're likely going to get some volume. But I think I probably have to see it a little bit more with Lazard. So if I had to choose, I'm going to take Washington over him right now. Tate would be a coin flip, definitely going over him, John Brown as well. Eric Ebron, tight end 14, over or under?
I'm going to take the under.
Interesting. All right. I think I'm going to go under as well. ADP of 198.
I believe that's an update from my original ranks. So I'm going to have to do an update before we release them on the Drive-In Podcast consensus rankings.
I am glad that you have finally let that spiteful part in your heart go after what he did to you and the other Detroit Lions fans, and you're starting to come back around on Ebron.
Look, man, you only have him 2 spots ahead of me, so don't get all high and mighty.
So ADP of 198.83, he is tight end 28 off the board. Just ahead of him, Devin Asiasi, David Njoku, and O.J. Howard. Would you take him over any of those three?
I'm probably taking him over all of them.
Interesting. All right.
I know.
I think Njoku would be the close one for me, and yeah.
Yeah, and I expect Njoku to be the highest scoring Cleveland tight end, but even as such, I do still only have him at tight end 20. Howard, man, he's going to be Delaney Walker. He's going to be the guy who spends his first contract on a team that doesn't use him, and then he's going to go to someplace like the Titans and have 8 or 9 really good years.
Don't say the Titans, because I'm all in on Jonnu Smith, so I don't need him to go there. You can go somewhere else. Go Washington. Send him to Washington. They need a tight end. That'd be a great place for him. But yeah, I'm with you. Njoku would be the close one for me because almost kind of like what we were just talking about with Howard. I could easily see Njoku going to another team like a Washington and all of a sudden becoming a complete stud. I do think that, and I've said it before, he was having a really good year last year before he got hurt. I really think he was kind of finally starting to turn it around and unfortunately just kind of broke his wrist and wasn't able to recover from there. Just behind Ebron, Will Dissly, Cole Kmet, and Dawson Knox. Would you take any of those three over him?
Nope.
So if this were like a week ago, I would have said the same thing. I'm kind of coming around on Cole Kmet. I watched a little bit more of his tape there at Notre Dame.
You're drinking that camp highlight Kool-Aid?
The camp stuff, yeah, I haven't seen any highlights, so I don't know. I haven't watched anything on him, but man, the talk coming out of there, they really seem to love him. We know that Matt Nagy has talked about how bad he wants a tight end. That's why they signed Trey Burton when they did. And if they can get Cole Kmet to be what they wanted Trey Burton to be, I think Cole Kmet could be really good for him. So Kmet, I think I'd take over him. I am starting to buy in a little. There's got to be that one guy every year that people fall in love with, and based on camp talk, and that's going to probably be the one for me this year. I've heard a lot of different stuff about him. I'm really kind of starting to like him there as the long-term tight end for the Bears. So that will do it for the Ravens and the Steelers. We will actually be doubling up, as I mentioned last week, on the previews this week. We're going to try and knock that out so we can start to completely knock out the rest of the preview stuff for the 2020 season. So we will have the Bengals and the Browns on Thursday's episode. I know for sure we'll have Matt back with us. I don't know if Tony will be joining us or not. He's got some stuff going on. So at worst, at least the three of us will be back here on Thursday. So we will be back Thursday talking Browns and Bengals. Until then, everybody have